All right, you're all witnesses to the faith. And there's a couple of different pieces that you carry with you all of the time as witnesses. First of all, you carry a narrative with you, a story, a verbal story, in which you want to be able to somehow articulate what it is that you believe, why you believe it, and why you act in the ways that you do, which are related to that which you believe fundamentally. The other piece, of course, is in addition to being able to talk about it in some intelligible kind of fashion, people will also want to know how you act on it. How will you make decisions? In what fashion will you treat people? And all of those kinds of things. So the other part of testimony is the actions which you demonstrate day by day. So whatever it is that you claim to be true about the world, theoretically at least, you're going to act in that fashion towards the world as you're living in it. And so a witness to faith gives a narrative testimony to what he or she believes to be true, how it has affected you, how it's transformed you, and how it is embodied in you. And from there then, people will also then see how it is that you act in your daily living, to see if in fact your faith does make a difference or it does not. And in your conversations, as you engage listeners in conversation about what you believe, they will always want to know different things about you. How did you come to this conclusion? How did you come to act in this way? How did you come to believe these kinds of things? And all of that. I was talking to a guy who's home neighbor of mine out in Creskyville, who went down and visited with some friends of his that he hadn't seen since college. And he had stayed away from them for about 15 years on purpose, because he knew that every time he got together with them, he would get rip-roaring drunk as a skunk. It was like permission. Okay? You've got friends like that, some of you. Not all. I do. We all have friends with whom we do different things. Right? Okay, and he came home very proud of himself, and rightly so, because he didn't fall into the trap this time. He didn't drink. He was able to just sort of catch up, enjoy the evening together, and just displayed a different kind of maturity about himself and a different picture of himself. Interestingly enough, as a couple of the other friends of his did too, but not all. But either way, you get the idea of over a period of time, as you're accumulating life experiences, you're accumulating certain faith statements about life as you understand it. At the same time, that's encapsulated and brought into your behavior as part of the testimony about what it is that you believe about life. It is always that way for all of us. The different kinds of studies that are done by sociologists and psychiatrists, social workers, and that kind of stuff are always very interesting. I was just reading one recently where there was a very terse conclusion. It goes this way. People are not evil at heart. They are sensitive to social pressure. Okay, you got the difference? People are not evil at heart. They are sensitive to social pressure. And what they were doing in their study was finding that most of us are vulnerable to social pressure of some sort. Even though we may be capable in a mature fashion of saying, no, not doing that, because I don't believe it's right, it is a test of your character, a test of your faith, and just a test of the way, the story of your life. So we are all sensitive to social pressure, and that was the conclusion of that study. It's very interesting because when you think about what it is for you and I, as people who believe that God is real and present through the gift of Jesus and the gift of the Holy Spirit, our calling as witnesses to Jesus, as witnesses to the goodness of God, is to bring pressure socially in our little parts of the world. To bring pressure to bear so that people begin to look at the world in a different way, different than they presently are. All right, presently today, and you know as well as I do that we're living in a fractured world. It's just the way it is. You're getting a cacophony of voices and opinions from all around. Doesn't matter whether it's radio or TV or the top 10 nonfiction books, which never strike me as nonfiction. They strike me more as fiction because they're opinion books rather than history peer-reviewed kinds of things. There is a difference. But the fracturing in our society also causes a lot of social pressure because we're pulled to agree with one side or the other. And even today, if you stand proudly as an independent thinker, it simply means what? You're wishy-washy. Right in the last election, I just thought I would just die. If I heard on the news, and from respectable, responsible adults who should know better, well, it's going to be that 10% that haven't made up their mind who are going to determine these elections. And they're just, by this time, they should have made up their minds. You know, and they were just bashing guys like me. Because I had made up my mind, and I knew I was looking for the mature adults. I wasn't looking for a particular party. I could care less about the party, just looking for mature adults. And that wasn't all that easy. And it's not getting any easier. Because if you're an ism, a movement type, true believer, you know, you'd rather see things go down the toilet rather than let the other side, whatever you perceive the other ism to be, rather than they come to some kind of compromise and agreement. It's called diplomacy, by the way, which is a sign of maturity. Thought I'd point that out. In any case, so we're living in a fractured time. And that was also true in Jesus' time. When he came to the Jordan River, John had caused no end of problems for the authorities in that day. Because remember what the Jordan River was all about. The Jordan River was where the slaves from Egypt, after 40 years, crossed over into the freedom of the promised land. Now, looking at it as an observer, you could be a Republican or a Democrat today. You tell me from your perspective, through your lens of politics, coming through the Jordan River, the river of freedom, and being baptized, and coming out into the promised land on the other side after your baptism, what, as a politician, were you to think? Was John the Baptist being a religious prophet? Or was he being a politician? Enough to make your head hurt. And it made King Herod, the fox's head hurt. And it made Pontius Pilate, Caesar Augustus's governor, his head hurt too. Because they couldn't decide whether John the Baptist was being a prophet and saying, the promise of God is about your freedom to live faithfully in the world and to practice your faith faithfully to God. Or was he a politician who in fact was raising a movement, an ism? You see? It can just make you crazy. The psalm today, I thought was really neat. I don't know if you picked that up because it talks a lot about how God has shaped the world. The voice of the Lord is upon the waters. The voice of the Lord, the God of glory, thunders. Right? We have had thunder and lightning. Right? In the last day or two, in the rain and the snow. Right? The Sci-Fi Channel. Where do you think the weathermen picked up thunder snow from? There was a science fiction movie on the Sci-Fi Channel last year. It's on repeat. Now you can watch it later today. Thunder snow, yay. All right. Yeah, and it's good too. That's very okay. So, the point is that the thunder and the lightning are giving praise to God. Nature has its own way of praising the Lord. Everything is built with praise of God in mind. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedar trees. The Lord breaks the cedars of Lebanon. Think about the big winds that come. What do they call those winds that go straight across? Straight line, yes, weather woman you are. The straight line shearing the trees across is actually the wind giving testimony to the power and the glory of God, and the trees bowing over, glorifying the Lord. And the Lord makes Lebanon skip like a cat. I'm not going to try to skip. And Mount Hermon skip like a young wild ox. What's that? It's an earthquake. All of creation gives praise to God in its own fashion. All of it. That which we perceive as bad may be, in fact, bad for us as human beings, living where we do. But the praise of God is built into all of creation. And when John baptized Jesus, he was building further into the creation another piece, more visibly. What does Jesus say, or the voice say? This is my Son, the beloved, with whom I delight. And yeah, I take the word delight instead of pleased, because pleased is like a whooshy, windy word. He used the word delight. I delighted in the ice cream I found in the back of the refrigerator, which my children, Charles, they hid the vanilla ice cream in the back of the refrigerator from me. And I delighted last night because I found it. The kids forgot it was there, and there was ice on top of it. But I didn't care. I was in happy delight. I wasn't pleased. I was delighted. That's why we use the word delight. And that is the master message that God tries to get through to the world in which we live in every way he possibly can. And by using us as witnesses, we then become part of his plan to expand that understanding of life. I love you, my Son, the beloved. You say that to and of anybody and treat them that way. This is one who is beloved, with whom I am delighted. You become a piece of God's good news, in other words, by both your words and your actions. The other part of that is that doesn't always just come that easy, and I know that too. It's hard to be delighted with some people who really tick you off. I don't care. I had a phone call from somebody from another church. They don't have a pastor right now, but they know Harding. From one of you who said, why don't you call Pastor Harding? I just want to thank you when you know who you are. Who said, my boss, I can't stand them. They are being so rotten and mean. I wanted to go out to a funeral of a relative that I would have needed an extra day to do it, and they refused to give me the time off with pay, even though I'm supposed to have in there that I get paid days for funerals of relatives. They decided the relative wasn't close enough. And so I went without pay. And when I came back, they were about as miserable as they could possibly be. And I said, okay, so what are you going to do? Well, I don't know. I'm just going to be miserable back or just suck it up and handle it. And I said, well, why don't you try talking to them? You're a church-going person. What did Jesus tell you to do in the Sermon on the Mount when somebody really aggravates you, or you really aggravate them? You go and you talk to them one-on-one. And so, she got back in touch a couple days later. Well, I went and talked to him one-on-one, and that didn't work at all. I said, well, just wait. Does Jesus say in the Sermon on the Mount that it's going to work? No, he doesn't, just in case you weren't sure. What he says then to do is to take a second person with you when you're having that conversation with somebody who's really got you worked up, which she had already done. And that went only a little bit better, but it went a little better for this reason. The person, work colleague who went with to talk to one of the bosses knew that the family in that business was having a really tough time. The owners of the business, very, very hard, ugly is the word time. And they were keeping it a secret, of course, trying to keep, how families bury stuff, trying to keep it under their rug. Yeah, like that. No lumps that rug. Yeah, wasn't working. It's coming out. So from there, they had a little talk, found out that there was more things going on. It has not changed necessarily the tone of the workplace right now, but over time, it will. Pretty sure it will. Can't guarantee it, but you get the idea. Jesus never says that the skills that you bring to bear in the way of reconciliation and forgiveness and maturity are always going to work. But it is incumbent on us because we have been baptized into the faith and because we have accepted the role of people who bear testimony to the love of God, to give it a shot. And you continue to give it a shot. And there comes a point, of course, where you then have to practice the art of forgiveness on yourself when you can go no further. And that happens too. You just can't do any more than you have done. So when Jesus was baptized in the Jordan River, he was baptized into two things. Just the same as you and me. We're baptized, one, into obligation. The obligation to try to gain the skills and the understanding of who God is and how he works in daily living through us and through other people. And also the major thing, recognition that it's all a gift. Your life is a gift. Your skills and abilities are gifts, same as mine and everybody else's. And it is then we come back to the vocational aspect. What work we carry with us wherever we are and whatever we're doing is the vocation we're calling to love people into existence, to love them into being, to love them into hope, to love them into reconciliation. All of those kinds of code language words we use as Christians actually play out pretty strongly in our daily lives. And it's hard. And that's why Jesus established the church, because you can't do it alone. Remember that thing back in the beginning, Worthington in his study, right? People were not evil at heart. They were sensitive to social pressure. And the reason Jesus established a church was to continue to bring some both pressure and consolation to we who were believers, because he knew we were going to need it. So anyhow, the net result of your baptism and mine is that we are all traveling companions through life together. And we all love each other all the time. Well, don't look at me like I have a hair. The hair out of place? Or we give it a shot. And if we're not able to do that, there are other people that we can use to be our intercessors. In any case, you're called to love the world God created and in which you live, and do it with as much style and skill as you've been given. Amen. Amen.